I'm Alexa Burton, and you can call me Lexi. Now, I would like to welcome you to today's episode of Two Chairs and a Camera. With me today, I've got Joe Tarantino.
Thanks for having me. I look forward to doing this for quite a few weeks now.
It's a pleasure, and I'm sure we're going to have a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
So, why don't you tell us a little bit about your books? What are you all about?
Well, for the most part, I'm about bicycling, and I'll give you a little quick backstory. The Reader's Digest versus. I'm a former aerospace chemist, engineer, ops manager that turned long-distance cross-country bicyclist.
Well, that's a bit
retirement.
of a...
Yes, and then that kind of evolved into also becoming an author. So that has been my course of action. I retired 11 years ago. Good Lord allowed me to get out early and through kind of a confluence of circumstances. But so I've been doing that for bicycling and riding really across all 50 states. I just finished Alaska last year.
Wow.
And so, I had this crazy dream that when I finished Alaska that I would have all my other states edited up and written up, and just all I had to do was add Alaska on.
Okay.
And well, that didn't work. So
I was going to say, is that one of in one of these,
no,
or that's going to be
not
something
even close.
else?
So
Okay.
this book that just came out covers my first 14 states, and it does a little bit of a backstory as well. This book overlaps a little bit this one. I actually published this one about, I'm going to say it was 2018, and it covered a ride that connected several previous rides that went from the East Coast to the West Coast. And that was just the one ride that did it. This book talks about all the connecting routes, and it also talks about a lot of the early trips I did growing up in Northeast Ohio. I grew up in Canfield, suburb of Youngstown, Ohio, and so I'm pretty familiar with the roads around here.
The person I had on the last podcast grew up in Youngstown.
There you go. The interesting thing is, my wife and I always joke when they say, "Where are you from?" I say Youngstown, Ohio, and she's from Youngstown, New York. And those that are familiar with the area, it's Youngstown, New York is up by Fort Niagara, and right near Niagara Falls. And of course, that was part of one of my adventures in here. My first long distance, but they became much longer. I rode from my home. Currently live in Louisville, and a friend of mine and I, we rode up to her home in Niagara Falls, crossed the Peace Bridge, went over some crazy roads and other bridges, and arrived at Niagara Falls, and then rode to her parents' farmhouse. So,
Convenient.
Yeah. Yes, it worked out very well. And actually, I did that. That was many, many years ago. I won't make anybody do the math, but it was the year I turned 30, and I just had this vague idea that if I didn't do a long distance bike ride before I turned 30, it was never going to happen. I was too old, and it wasn't going to happen. And
I think we all struggle with similar, maybe not the bike ride, but similar. If I don't do this by the time I'm 30, by the time I'm 40, then it's never going to happen. And how many long distance bike rides have you done since then?
Well, I would be nice to be able to tell you exactly how many. I can tell you I've been through all 50 states. I think that somewhere around 22, 23 trips that I have chronicled where I have spent at least 3 or 4 overnights. And
so there's plenty of time to do whatever it is you want to do that you think can't happen after 30.
That's exactly right. The interesting thing was, when I went through this book and I was doing some of the editing on it, self-editing, before I turned it over to another group of editors, is I was going through and I did all the early adventures, and then I got to this point, I said, I think the next trip I did was when I rode from my home in Louisville up to my son's apartment in Chicago. And I said, no, there had been something in between there. And as I went through it, I said, you know what, there wasn't. It was like 17 years I went. And of course, we had 2 boys. We had them 13 and a half years apart. So the joke is it took us 4 decades to raise 2 kids, where other people can get them done a lot.
And I thought there was a big gap in my family, 6 years.
Yeah. So anyway, and it just really struck me when that was one of the things that came out for me personally as I went through this book, is that how fast life goes by. 1 minute I'm thinking I've got to get a bike ride in if I'm going to ever do a long distance bike ride, I got to do it before I hit 30, or it's just not going to happen. And the next thing I know, I'm retired, and here I am.
Smaller scale, but I was just pulling tomatoes out of the garden, and now I'm prepping for Christmas.
There you go. It doesn't take long. And what's the old saying? You know, the days are long, but the years go by fast.
Yeah.
And part of what happened after I finished this trip across the United States, connected all these different routes, and that's where I thought the bicycling was going to end.
Now, have you ridden consecutively from one side of the U.S. to the other?
No.
Okay.
I just never really was able to carve out enough time to do it. When I first graduated from college, I thought, you know what, I'll take a month off. It's about 3,000 miles. I can do 100 miles a day. Of course, I was 22 back then, and I got a job right away out of college, and it just didn't happen. And as I became, first son was born, and I got increasing responsibilities at work.
Mm-hmm.
I just wasn't able to carve out enough time to do it, and I started feeling guilty about taking what time I did take to go bike ride and away from family vacations. And so eventually I got into long distance running too, and I was able to stay in shape in a much shorter period of time than cross country bicycling. But after I finished these 5 main long trips that I did across the United, I thought, well, that was it. And then when I got back home, I just started thinking, man, there's something else. I'm not done yet. And so it kind of became what I called a 50 by 70 challenge. I wanted to get all 50 states in before I hit 70. And I made it with almost 2 years to spare.
Now, do you have any kind of map or something at home that like highlights the parts that you've taken?
I do. And actually, if you get on my website, it's joetbikes.com. You'll find a lot of the information there, a lot of pictures thing, but there is a map that has all the main routes.
Well, I will try and find that map and put that up here because this is quite interesting.
Yeah, and some of them most people will be familiar with. One of the longer treks that I did it over, I think it was 4 different trips, but I've done all the Route 66 from Chicago to Santa Monica.
I would love to do that someday, but in a car.
And sometimes I went east to west, sometimes I went west to east. So I didn't always take advantage of the westerly winds. Sometimes I was going into them, and sometimes I was...
I would be more concerned about not wanting to face the sun.
In the mornings, that's troublesome because the cars that are coming up behind you also are blinded by that sun. So that's a concern. I've also done some of the other things, the big long places I've done. I've went from Maine all the way down to Key West, and again, several different trips and things along the East Coast Greenway. I've done all of the Ohio to Erie Trail, which starts up in Cleveland and finishes up in Cincinnati, and then I took kind of a back way through Kentucky up and down some hills and that, and ended up in Nashville. And from Nashville, I picked up the Natchez Trace, and that obviously goes down to Natchez, Mississippi. And then I picked up the Mississippi River Trail that took me down to New Orleans. And that was, again, about 3 different trips.
Now, when you're riding, do you, do and see other things as you're going along, or is it just push on through?
No. Well, I'll tell you what. The first few trips that I did, it was push on through because I didn't have enough vacation time. And the one that really resonated with me that I said, this is not the way to do it, was it was about... a couple months before I was formally going to retire, and I had some vacation. I said, I'm gonna burn it up now. And so I took a week off, and I went back to Youngstown, New York, where I had ridden to before, and then I wanted to ride over to the East Coast along the Erie Canal and some other trails and roads along that way. The only way to make it fit was by doing 100 miles a day, and it was in the summertime, so I would get up at be on the road by 5:30 in the morning, and sometimes I'd get to the hotel, 4 o'clock, 4:30 at night, call the little pizza advertisement that was in the sleazy motel that I was staying in, and take a shower, and then it would arrive about the time I got out, go to bed, and then do it again. And I said, you know what, I'm not seeing anything, and it's just not the way to do it. So I finally have carved that back. I think for me, the sweet spot is about 50 to 60 miles a day. I like getting up early, getting things going. My wife has since joined me. And when I say join me, it means she sleeps in, and sometimes she gets to the next hotel before I do. Other times I get there first and check in.
So there's a car going on.
There's a car, whatever, a rental or something like that. And anyway, but yeah, we'll get there, and so that allows me to stop and see things. The night before I ride, I know where the hotel is. I've got that ad, but then I look along Google Maps and start looking up, are there cool little coffee shops or cafes or just out of the way diners, and try to stop at a couple of those.
Or some big, I don't know.
Oh yeah, some big attraction,
some big
or whatever.
something that you just have to see.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you can't ride past Mount Rushmore and not stop and see it.
Well, I did and I didn't. Part of the thing was I went through the Badlands, and the route that I did took me a little bit north of Mount Rushmore. So that was a day trip that we went over to Mount Rushmore and did all that stuff. So that's the advantage when my wife follows me. She has a vehicle, so I don't have to ride, and I can kind of keep on task with, the schedule.
And then if something does happen, which you don't want it to, but you've got a little cushion there.
Well, I'll tell you,
a little peace of mind more so.
The interesting thing is, when I realized what was happening was that sometimes I take more chances when she's there, because I know, well, she can rescue me. So there was one time, there was severe thunderstorms, tornadoes forecast, and I said, well, it's not going to hit for a couple hours, so let me see if I can get a couple hours of riding in, and then if it looks like it's going to hit, I'll call you. Well, I got trapped underneath a canopy of trees, and lightning bolts just dancing around me, pouring down rain. It was not my best idea, but she got there, and I survived, and here I am today.
I have been through the Badlands a couple of times in a car. The last time was 16, 17 years ago. And it was the middle of summer. It was 102 degrees. And I'm by myself. And I go into heat stroke in the middle of South Dakota.
Yeah.
That was terrifying.
Well, and it's interesting that you mentioned that, because this was in late July, and it was hot.
I know what I need to ask you.
And I did discover that the Badlands were appropriately named. I got to the destination, and I checked my pulse that night like I normally do, and it was elevated. It was probably 25, 30 beats a minute faster than it normally is. And I got up the next day, and it was lower, and I started riding, and within 10, 15 miles, I knew there was no way. It was supposed to hit 109 degrees at the destination.
Oh.
And so I called my wife. I said, come get me. I ate ice cream. I got straightened around and finally got my way through there. But yeah, it was tough.
It gets hot.
It does. It does. And there's not much out there.
Now I'm trying to remember which state this is in. And my dad's going to be yelling at me when I get this wrong. Because he watches these. I think it's North Dakota, but there is a truck stop called Wall Drug.
Oh, that's...
I was going to ask if you knew where... We
Yeah.
used to always stop there driving through vacations.
After my wife picked me up, just a little bit, 20 miles southeast of the Badlands, I said, well, here's what we're going to do. I says, we're in this area. Let's go visit Wall Drug. And our younger son was with us at the time. He had taken a few days vacation to come out because he had never been to Mount Rushmore. And so he spent some time. So you've got to see Wall Drug and all the crazy.
Is it South Dakota?
It's South Dakota. It's right off Route
Okay.
90. Yeah, just before you get into Rapid City.
We used to go every single year because we drive all the way through to the far side of Montana and back.
Okay.
And we'd always go to Wall Drug, and I remember the jackalope everything and all the little. And it's been years.
There's actually some artwork in there, and we were looking at it. It's a big post, and it was painted by the artist came from Louisville, Ohio.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, but you can't miss Wall Drug, because when you're coming out on 90, it's about every 2 minutes there's
free
a sign.
ice water.
Yeah, free ice water. But it's interesting out that the interstate out there, and in Montana too. Because there's so few roads, you're actually allowed to ride bicycles on the interstates out there, and also part of the Southwest too.
I've been on those roads, but it didn't dawn on me, or I've never seen it.
I've only seen a couple other crazy people other than myself. But actually, some of those roads, or the interstates, are actually safer than some of those back roads because they're twisty, turny. They don't have a good berm to ride on. Whereas the interstate, you got a nice wide berm,
Mm-hmm.
and I've kind of got to the habit. I got a little mirror, and I'll kind of tune in and I'll kind of look. Oh, there's a truck coming, or there's a series of trucks, and so I wait. And as soon as they go by, I swing out and kind of get into the draft, and it kind of pulls me along there. So.
Scariest driving experience in my life was in Montana. It's a thunderstorm, and I'm going through the mountains, and I am behind that carnival ride that has the four giant bears.
Yeah.
And all I could picture was kerthunk, kerthunk, kercrunch. I lived. There was no falling, tumbling bear, but...
Well, here's another interesting thing I found out about Montana, and you probably took the interstate out there, and there were a couple places that I did have to ride the Route 90, and actually it was real close to the Idaho border. And I was on that trip. I was going from the West Coast. I was going east to the place where I needed to connect my route at in South Dakota. But I would look in my little rearview mirror and say, "Oh, there's a car back there. Okay, he's back there a ways." And I'd pedal it, and the next thing I go, boom, they go by there. And
the speed limit.
The speed limit used to be unlimited.
Yeah, safe and prudent,
yeah,
I think is what it used to
now,
say.
Now it's 80. And I don't think anybody believes it anymore. They just do what they want to do.
They got used to safe and prudent.
Yeah. I've quickly learned that when you see that vehicle, you make sure you stay over as far as you can on the right side, because it's going to be coming pretty quick. So, yeah.
So I was going to ask what came first, the riding or the biking, but it sounds like the biking came first.
The biking came first. Yeah, I did some crazy things when I was younger, and that was the first section of this book. I tried to figure out, how can I pull these together how do I want to title it? And then it finally struck me, oh, this is just a collection of bad decisions. And that's exactly what it was. And how I survived them, I don't know. But after my first 100-miler, I learned what it meant to bonk. And I was just dead at the end. And I was just a few weeks away from graduating high school. And I worked at a lab in Canfield. And for some reason, I had the keys to the alarm there. And it was on my way back home, and soon as I was doing the math on my little clicky little odometer down there, and I realized I had 100.6 miles right when I hit that, past that lab that I was working at. I went in, turned the alarm off, got on the phone, called my dad. I said, "Come get me." I said, I was less than 5 miles from home, but I says, "I am not pedaling one more pedal stroke on this thing." So anyway, that was one of the first crazy things I did.
So what made you decide to put it on paper?
Well, I originally, let me back up one step here. When I was in college, I could not decide what I wanted to major in. I had spent a lot of time in this lab. Yeah, and so, but people probably don't bounce between the choices I had. I was looking at chemistry and English, and so
it's a little different.
I kind of bounced back and forth, and finally I got looking at the catalog. I said, "You know what? I think I can do them both." And so I did. So I was double major chemistry and English. Got out, didn't do anything with English. Got a master's in analytical chemistry. Got a master's in business administration. Then later on after that, and then when I retired, I always enjoyed reading though, and I could care less about all the grammar and the punctuation, all that stuff. But I just love reading, and I always wanted to write a science fiction book, and that was kind of where I was headed. But then as I was out on a couple of these bike trips, I said, "You know what? I think this would be a good way to get started, was to write a book about the bicycling adventures." And anyway, so when I was finishing up the first trip that was going to connect everything, I had a mental outline, and I kind of knew what I wanted to do, and but I just felt checked from no other way. I just felt checked from God that this was not what I was supposed to be doing, that I had prayed for protection on this trip. And, I was going to make it. It was only, 10 miles from where I was going to end up going. And I was going to make it. And I felt like, you know what? I was supposed to write something different than a science fiction book or just a bicycle book about my adventures. So the first book is more of a devotional style, kind of based on the 23rd Psalm. So when I got through that, and then I started going through and getting some editors, this one, I was going to write all about my bicycling adventures too, all 50 states. Well, by the time the editors got through, they said, "No, this reads like a bicycling journal. We want to make this more of a memoir style." And they said, "You need to talk about some of your feelings instead of just describing the action. I said, oh man, I'm the introvert guy. I'm the
most
yeah.
writers are,
and I don't want to do that. But anyway, we got through it, and I got 14 states out of the way. Shared some of my feelings, and
so does that mean there's a book too?
There is another book coming on top of this one. I'm about a third of the way through, and they tell you for a memoir, particularly if you're not Michelle Obama or Melania Trump, you don't want to go more than 70,000 words, and this one was right about that. So the other one, I've justified going a little longer, that it is not going to be quite the memoir style. I have run into some of the craziest, I shouldn't call them crazy people, interesting people along the way. And some of their stories I just can't cut out. It would, to me, it'd be like saying, which one of your children don't you want anymore?
You have to have the most random, eclectic, and large, just a pile of stories.
It is. I mean, it's just amazing. And there's other times it's just dirt, sand, and quiet. And then other times it's like every stop, every 10, 15 miles, you meet somebody, particularly if you're on one of these busy trails. There's a trail that goes, it's called the Gap, the Greater Allegheny Passage. Starts in Pittsburgh, goes to Cumberland, Maryland, and then it becomes the Chesapeake, Ohio, the C&O. And when you finish up, you're less than a quarter mile from the Lincoln Memorial. But on that trail, it was just so busy. I was there in summertime. You're always meeting people. And when I tried to schedule the words that I was going to apply. And so, being the chemist and the geeky guy, I allotted X number of words per day of the trip. Well, that trip from Pittsburgh along that trail, it was every day, and I had to go over my allotment for those. I said, I'll cut back somewhere else. But yeah.
Do you have a favorite state?
I've been asked that a lot, and I answer it with a couple caveats. The most beautiful state was Alaska.
Okay.
And without a doubt, just the mountains and just the landscape and just the raw beauty of that was just incredible. However, I was with a group. It was the only time I did a group ride. I didn't get a chance. We didn't stop at little cafes and things like that. First of all, because there's not very many of them out there. But second of all, it's because the two guides that we had, one of them biked with us, and the other one drove the van that had a little trailer that had all the goodies and the food. So every 15 miles, we'd just pull off on the side of the road and we'd meet him and do that. So I missed out on a lot of that. But I will tell you, as far as a single ride, was the one that I just did this last March. Was when I rode from St. Augustine down to Key West. Riding over the Keys was just incredible.
I've been from St. Augustine down to
Key West?
No, I haven't been that far. I want to get down there, but
Right,
I haven't.
yeah.
I mean, I've been to Orlando and I've been over
Yeah.
to Tampa.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's Tampa's south of Orlando, right?
Kind of more east, but a little bit south.
And
yeah.
is it
Or no, west. It's west.
It's west.
Yeah,
is
yeah.
it Clearwater?
Clearwater's
over
over
there?
by
I've
Tampa.
been
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And it's gorgeous. I love St. Augustine. I love Daytona. I love Orlando. I want to get to Key West. I haven't done it
Well,
yet.
I will tell you one thing that I did not research well enough. We spent the night in Daytona, and I quickly realized Bike Week did not mean bicyclist, and there was probably 500,000 of them, and so anyway, that made it kind of busy.
Okay.
But that was probably one of my favorite rides. But probably the state that I would say would be the most rewarding was probably Washington State.
Okay.
And just because I started out on the Pacific side, rode up with the ocean there,
Mm-hmm.
and every day, every 50, 60, 70 miles, it changed so drastically. Then all of a sudden, I turned to the east and I start climbing the Cascades, and you go into these monstrous, beautiful, evergreen trees, and then you keep climbing and climbing, and then you see Mount St. Helens in the distance, and you see Mount Rainier in the distance, and they get larger and larger and larger. Next thing you know, you're climbing. I climbed up the Cascades into the pass. Probably I started at 4 o'clock in the morning. It was pitch black, and I was pretty nervous about that one. My wife was not going to be there for this one, so I was on my own. And if I was going to make it, it was going to be without her. and then you get to the top, you go screaming down the mountain, and the next thing you know, you're in the eastern Washington deserts. And it just was the people that I met there that were just there at the right time that helped me out whatever I needed. It was just incredible, and it was a very emotional and a spiritual experience for me. I just really felt the presence of God through that way as I rode in that, and it was a very rewarding thing. And I'm glad I'm through it. I don't know that I'd want to do it again by myself, but it's done.
It's always better with somebody else with you.
Yeah.
But I want to back up just a minute to Florida because I got a funny one. I've been to Bike Week a few times on purpose.
Okay.
Maybe the third or fourth time I've been down there. My mom calls me. I saw it on the news that it's Bike Week and there's 500,000 bikes down there and you need to be careful. And I literally take the phone away from my ear and I look at it. And I'm not on video call. Mom, why do you think I'm here? Oh. Went down 4 Bike Week.
Well, now, when you rode through South Dakota, did you stop? If you're a biker, did you stop at Sturgis?
I have not been to Sturgis. And as far as me being the biker, I am on speaking terms with a clutch. I'm a passenger princess.
Okay. Gotcha.
But no, but some of my earliest, I don't know how old I was. I must have been at least 6. Some of my earlier memories was driving through South Dakota, North Dakota, Minnesota, going on vacation to my grandparents' house, and it was the lead up to Sturgis. So I'm in the car and we're just surrounded by bikes, and it's so cool.
Well, I'll tell you what, Sturgis and I did not get along very well. It wasn't...
Did you end up there at Bike Week too?
I did not end up there at Bike Week, but I was traveling and I was, there was a whole circumstances that just caused us to switch our whole thing around, and it's detailed. Hopefully it's clear enough, but there was a death a sudden death of a very good friend that my wife had to fly home for the same time. My son was flying out, and so anyway, so I had to get back to this other spot. We rerouted it and figured it all out, and it was another one of those days where it was going to get up and finish right around 100 degrees, and I'm riding, and so I got up early, and so I'm doing okay, and then I ended up on this back road that was supposed to take me through this beautiful trail and save me about 5 miles, and it came to a chain link fence that said no trespassing, violators will be prosecuted. So I put in, okay, let's get out of bicycle routes, let's put in car routes, and it took me back on the highway, and I ended up going into Sturgis, and I thought, well, I'm just going to get a quick meal here before it gets too hot, get some breakfast, and it was not a quick meal. It just, all I ordered was their, 1 egg, toast, and a couple slices of bacon, and it was over an hour before I finally left. There were 2 ladies next to me. They got up and left. They just said, they saw the server, they gave them the money, and they said, we didn't get our food, here's the money for this, we're leaving. And so about 5 minutes later, I did the same thing. She says, oh no, it just came up. So anyway, when I finally met my wife and our son at the next stop, I said, that's it. We were supposed to spend the night in Sturgis. It was about 20 miles away. I said, I am not ever going back to that town again. And I occasionally, I'd be in restaurants and things if they screw up, so they get over it. But by the time we figured it out, it was actually better to stay where we were. It saved us backtrack a little bit. But yeah, I probably won't go back to Sturgis again.
I would love to see Sturgis Bike Week. It's just,
I know
there's something about that chaos that I love. And I'm an introvert too, so tell me why that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I like to be a part of the chaos. I just like to be just outside it.
Well, I suppose that would be okay at some point in time in my life, but not when I am trying to complete a 75-mile
not
ride
when you're on a...
before it gets to be 100 degrees.
Yeah.
And it just didn't work out
and it wasn't Bike Week. It was just, you were just getting through. It was a different thing.
Yeah. There's another thing when people ask me, they say, oh, did you ever do RAGBRAI? And I can't remember what the acronym is. It registers something or other, but it's across Iowa. and it's a big, probably, I don't know, 10, 20,000 bicyclists every summer, end of July, beginning of August, and I'm thinking, that I can't imagine it being hotter, and it is just one great big party, and that just has no appeal to me. I just would rather be out by myself and ride and get it done and go from place to place.
Get in your zone. And...
Yeah, exactly. But
now, do you listen to music or audiobooks or anything?
no,
while you
I
go?
try to
You
stay
just
alert.
go?
I try to stay alert because I've always got my antenna up for dogs. And if I hear the barking, I don't want to have music on or anything. So I do a lot of thinking, meditating. I find if I actually, even now when I'm struggling with how to rearrange a passage or something like that on my in one of my books and things, if I go out for a bike ride, all of a sudden it comes to me and I feel good about it, and so it just helps me out.
So are you do you have author socials? I know as introverts we tend to not do these things.
Well, I'll tell you what, I love going to coffee shops, and so that's what I do quite frequently. I was there in one today, just writing and things. So a lot of times I will talk to the different coffee shops, and I will schedule events, and then I will publish them, and I will. And if people buy books, that's great. If they don't, I still drink coffee, and I enjoy that. So it's not a lost cause. But the easiest way is to go on Amazon to find my book. It's Pale Pink Roads, and Joe Tarantino, and you'll find that pretty easily. And it's also on my author page on Amazon, and then this book will pop up there as well. But I really strongly recommend people read this one first, because this one I just don't feel like it was. I don't want to say a practice.
It's a different
book.
beast.
It's a different beast. This is a much easier and a much lighter and a fun read. And so that's the easiest way, is go on Amazon, Pale Pink Roads. Or if you're interested, like I mentioned, I have a website, joetbikes.com. There's links to all my social media accounts there, some of the organizations I donate money to, and also a lot of, like I said, the map, some of the pictures of some of the places I've been, and links to where you can buy my book or contact me directly if you think it'd be more valuable to have a signed copy, or you've got questions.
Signed copies are always fun.
Yeah. So anyway, that's probably the easiest way, is on Amazon, Pale Pink Roads, or my website, joetbikes.com.
And if in the next week or so you send me whatever links you want me to put in the description, I will load the description up with whatever you want people to be able to find. Now, the way I like to wrap things up, and I don't know if you've watched any of these before, but give us one fun fact, interesting story, wild card that doesn't have to do with books or writing, or let's say bicycling, since that's what we've been talking about.
Oh,
one fun something to leave the people with.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Well, I'll tell you what. So we just finished up Halloween. Okay, so I was a operations guy. There are 3 shifts, and anyway, I came in, and I would always get up early, go to work, because I like to check on the 3rd shift, make sure I knew how things went, get the reports out, see if the work on the floor matched the inventory and all that kind of stuff, and just get my coffee and settle into the day before the chaos of the morning meetings and all that stuff happened. And I would stick around the 2nd shift as well. So anyway, I walk in, and I go upstairs, go to the office, and kind of walk through the floor and stuff, and one of the other supervisors come up to me and says, "Hey, did you check with," I won't mention the name, he says, "Check with so-and-so today?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Did he tell you what was going on?" I said, "No." He said, He goes, "You might want to go ask him what happened last night." Anyway, apparently this guy, Halloween was a big deal for him. He put on a Jason mask, came through the back door with a running chainsaw, and scared the devil out of the poor girls that were there working. And when I talked, I said, "Why did you think ever in anyone's lifetime that this was a good idea?" He says, "Well," he says, there was no chain on it. There was no chain."
They couldn't tell that.
I said, but here you are walking in. These people are working with torches. They've got needles and scalpels. And,
I would have thrown a lit torch at him. Although presumably,
I said, "Why don't you go home and let me think about what we're going to do?" So I'll leave the disciplinary action unmentioned, what occurred there. But yeah, that was, and again, I could write stories about what happened at work, but you know, there was all those kind of crazy things. Some of them aren't really good to repeat, but yeah, there were some fun things that happened out there.
Wow. Well, that was definitely a wild
So that
card.
didn't have to do with biking, and it didn't have to do with books. So how about that?
Well, it was a pleasure having you today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed chatting with you.
And all of you out in YouTube and Spotify world, if you had fun today like we did, if you could give the video a like and then subscribe if you haven't already, I'd really appreciate it. And as always, I'll see you next time. Bye!